Hey everyone, it's Tira with Rent Mason and Leafcutter Bees. I am here in Aurora, Oregon at our Mason bee and Houdini Fly cages here with Abigail Lehner from UC Davis. We are here at the Oregon State University Extension and Research Center. It's amazing here, and I've been so excited to come show you what these Houdini Fly cages look like. Abigail and I are going to go, well, she's going to teach me how to mark bees, mason bees, with different color dots on the back of their back, and then she releases them. And so we're going to take you on a little adventure today to teach you what researchers do to study mason bees and Houdini Fly, and we're going to take you along on this little journey. So let's go. Now inside one of our research cages, it's a bit short for me, so I'm going to lift it up, and every single cage has been planted with Phacelia, and it is the most gorgeous flower. It smells so sweet out here in the fields, and people are always asking me what to plant for mason bees. Okay, Phacelia is what you should plant for mason bees, and Pieris japonica and heather and all the list of flowers that we discussed in our Cisco video earlier this week. Great things to plant to support your mason bees, but each cage is set up with a mason bee nesting tubes where Abigail has been releasing mason bees and Houdini Fly, and we are now going to show you the process of how she has been doing that. All right, let's go.
And today I am going to be painting bees to release in our big insect cages. Now the reason that I mark them with paint is so that I can keep track of each individual female that I release in the cages. I set up video cameras at the nest block, and then I can look at the footage and associate each color with the female that I marked, so I can keep track of one bee for her whole lifetime. Alrighty, so I have a cooler here where I've got my bees with some ice packs. They need to be cool for me to paint because if they're warm and active, it's much more difficult to paint them. So I'm going to take her out and put her into our bee squeezer. This is just a canister with some mesh, and then I've got a cork with a sponge on top. This does not hurt the bees at all. It's just a way to keep them stable while we paint them. So I'm going to gently just grab her here. Set her on the sponge there, and then stick her in. So, yep. The joys of live animals. Okay, so now you can see there's her head, thorax, and abdomen. I'm going to put a dot of paint gently on her thorax there. So this bee is going to be a light blue lady. And just a little dot like that. I'll be able to see on the video, and then I blow on it gently so that it dries. And then, as you can see, she is totally happy and fine, ready to get away from me and be done with participating in this. So she'll be excited to go into the cages and have some flowers later. And I'll boop, stick her right back into her vial, and we'll go release her outside. All right, we have our beautiful marked females here that we are going to be releasing into the cage now. Let's go. Okay, so I just open it up and gently shake them onto the nest block. Dark blue and red. We've got light blue here. And then we've got green and white. Come on, lady. There we go. Whoop. Now hopefully they'll get nesting within a couple of days.
All right, Abigail and I are at the cages, and she's about ready to come in. And there's Abigail. We're in the cage. What are these flowers again?
Lacy Phacelia.
They are so pretty.
They have purple pollen.
The bees are covered in purple pollen. And Abigail is going to tell us what she is checking.
So I have a nest block set up here and I've been filming these bees all day. Each bee is marked with a different color of paint on the top of her back where she can't reach it, just like us. And then on the camera, I can see her go in and out and track each female to see their nesting. And then when we add the Houdini flies in, I'll be able to see how they interact and how the Houdini flies will impact the mason bees. So we're finishing up for the day. So I'm just taking my camera off the nest block here. And then I'm just gonna look inside the nest with a flashlight, like I'm sure many of you do at home, and see how much nesting has been done today, and mark with my pen here on the straw how much nesting progress the bees made today. Pull the tube out of my bee hotel, and I'm checking to see how many eggs were laid each day. So I can hold it up to the light and see the pollen inside. So I marked here for May 3rd, here May 4th, and this is today, May 5th, for the progress that the bee made each day.
Great. I'm going to do a quick little Q&A session with you, Abigail, because there are so many people that are curious to learn about Houdini Fly and what we can do. And so I know you've been researching for quite a while. So tell us how long you've been researching and what you are learning.
I first started working with bees in 2017, so almost 10 years now. But with Houdini Fly, I started working with them at the beginning of my PhD, which I started in 2022. And I have 3 years worth of data now at everyone's home gardens where they let me come and sample. And one of the biggest things that we have found at these sites is really big increases in Houdini Fly every year. So the first year that I sampled, which was spring of 2023, I saw that 1 in 10 of the bee larvae were affected by Houdini Fly. So 1 in 10 of those brood cells had Houdini Fly inside of them. Now last spring, 2025, we saw this increase to 1 in 3 bee larvae. So 1 in 3 brood cells had Houdini Fly in them. So significant increases each year in Houdini Fly, which is, a concerning part of my research, but important for us to track the parasitism rates from year to year. So this has led us to create these insect cages here, and I'm also modeling the establishment potential of Houdini flies to determine how they might spread through the country so that we can stop them from reaching other places. So one of the interesting things about seeing these big increases in parasitism rates is that, when I go and sample at everyone's gardens, I don't know how many bees were nesting there and how many flies were there. So to see these huge, these houses that have 80% of their babies taken by Houdini Fly, is that caused by 2 flies or is that caused by 80 flies? We have no idea. So with the cages, by putting in a controlled number of bees and a controlled number of flies, we can determine what the population impacts of Houdini Fly on the mason bees are going to be. And we know how many flies cause these high parasitism rates that we're seeing.
Can you tell us a little bit about last season? You were collecting the Houdini Fly larvae out of the nest, and tell us a little bit about what you were doing to incubate them, because I think that's really fascinating.
Yes, so what I've done in past years is when I found Houdini Fly in nests, I would put them into a Ziploc baggie, freeze them, kill them, and then get rid of them. And then I said, well, I have all these larvae. I might as well get some use out of them and learn something, right? So I took the larvae and I created small chambers, basically tiny pieces of straw that I cut up and put the Houdini Fly larvae inside. And I put them in different temperature and humidity conditions that matched all different regions of the US to see how well the larvae survived in these different conditions. Because the flies spend most of their life as larvae, right? They hatch, eat the pollen, and they spend their whole life until next spring when they pupate as larvae. So we're really interested to know, can they survive all over the US, or are there only certain regions that are going to be impacted? Because if we can control them before they spread, it's going to save everybody a lot of effort and money.
Right. And in that research, what did you find? Like, did the humidity affect them, or the temperatures affecting them?
So far, we tracked their survival after last summer. So in fall, I opened up all those straw pieces and counted how many of the larvae survived. And we actually did not see any difference between the temperature and humidity treatments, which suggests that they have a really high potential to spread and establish in other parts of the U.S.
And do we know how many babies they lay? Do we understand by studying maybe fruit flies and other things like that? Like, how many larvae do you think that they're laying?
We don't know exactly how many one female Houdini fly can lay. However, a fruit fly adult can lay 300 to 500 eggs in her lifetime, and fruit flies and Houdini flies are very closely related, so that could be similar. And when I open up brood cells, I have seen almost 200 Houdini fly larvae inside of a single brood cell in a straw. So there can be massive numbers of Houdini fly larvae compared to the bee larvae, because bees, one mason bee can only lay about 15 or so babies in her lifetime. So the flies greatly outnumber them.
And you were telling me there's a name for that, where one Houdini fly it might not be one Houdini fly that lays that. What's the terminology, the scientific term, when multiple Houdini will lay in one nesting chamber?
Yes, so we suspect, Dr. Natalie Boyle at Penn State and I have discussed this, that there's potentially hyperparasitism. And this is when a lot of parasites are going in and laying eggs in the same pollen loaf, and that's why we are possibly seeing so many larvae in a single brood cell.
And that's one of the things that we are experimenting with right now. We were on a call with Natalie and Abigail and myself a few weeks ago to figure out some bait traps that we can send people across the country. Because thank you for reporting your Houdini fly. We are getting a lot of reports of Houdini fly. Abigail is tracking them, and then we've picked about 30 people where we've sent these Houdini fly traps all across the country to people to set up in their yards. And why don't you tell them, because I created all this stuff, but tell them the 3 formulas that we are practicing, because this is research and data we want to share with everybody, because it's something that you can try in your backyard. As we've heard from other reports, there are different formulas and solutions that are working, and then people are just vacuuming them up, which seems to be really successful as well. So can you talk about some of the ways that hosts, if they have Houdini fly, what they can do to stop them from nesting in their little sweet baby bees?
Yes, so like Tira said, manual removal, like squishing or vacuuming them up, is an effective way of reducing the amount of parasitism that you get in your bee hotel. There are studies out of Europe where the Houdini fly is native that show this. Now, since Houdini fly is not native here and is a big problem for us, we are trying out these different traps. In our traps, we created 3 different formulas to try out. We have no idea how well they're going to work, but if you try something and it works well for you, please share. So the first trap that we tried was a mix of water and pollen. Honeybee pollen is very easy to buy online, so we used honeybee pollen. We thought because the flies, lay their eggs on pollen provisions, that they might be attracted to the smell of pollen. So that's why we went ahead and mixed it up with water. We add 1 drop of dish soap, which breaks the surface tension, so when the fly goes into the trap, then they get stuck in that water and can't come out again. The next trap that we tried was a mix of mason bee pheromone and water. Now, mason bee pheromone is not easily available online. The chemical that it's made with is decanoic acid, but unfortunately this is not easily commercially available for people to try. Then the third option, we went with a classic fruit fly trap, which is apple cider vinegar. We believe that the Houdini fly might also feed on rotting fruit. We're still trying to learn what the adults eat, but this is why we tried out the apple cider vinegar. If they're attracted to that fermenting smell, potentially just like fruit flies, then the same thing where they'll go in, get trapped by that dish soap, and be stuck in the trap. Now, if you find that something else works really well, we would love to know so that we can share it widely with everybody and also try it out and see how well it actually reduces parasitism of these mason bees.
And we have heard from other mason bee hosts that Malbec, I think it's Argentine, wine. I had another report from a woman who uses red sherry cooking wine. That worked really well. And we did a couple of different traps. So we purchased from these black canisters because Abigail and Natalie wanted to replicate a black nesting chamber. And so we were using that when we sent those bait traps to people across the country. But I also set out traps locally to different people's backyards. And I went to the dollar store and I went and I bought the little saucer containers, the plastic ones. I poked holes in those and I put the different samples of bait in there. So it can be a really simple thing that you can experiment with at home. Our citizen scientists that are out there wanting to try to figure out ways of trapping Houdini. Rick from It's All the Buzz has been using different types of bait trap as well. So I encourage you to go to his Facebook page, It's All the Buzz. He shares some great tips on tracking and catching Houdini fly. So yeah, there's a lot of great resources out there. I know some people are talking about lining the black house with tanglefoot. Oh, that's something I want you to share. We've been chatting this whole time on this trip. I'm asking questions. I'm so curious. But you went out to people's homes and you sat for 45 minutes in their yards studying what Houdini fly do. So explain to people where they go, because some people are having success using tanglefoot because the Houdini fly are resting. Can you tell them what you discovered?
Yes, so I have spent a lot of time watching video of Houdini fly and mason bee interacting, and then also sitting at people's bee hotels and just watching and taking notes kind of on what's going on. And I'm sure that many of you have seen similar things at your bee hotels, that a lot of the bees, the flies, hang out around the bee hotel, right? They sit, they maybe fly around and kind of assess the holes and then land again. Then when a bee leaves, they'll sneak in and then they come out and check, go back in, come out and check, go back in. And so since they're hanging around the blocks like that, some people have been trying some different sticky substances on their blocks or near their blocks to capture the flies. I do want to caution you to be careful about this. Tanglefoot is really strong and it captures a lot of different insects, including bees. It won't necessarily only get your Houdini flies. So you just want to be careful about using a barrier adhesive like this. If you use a weaker barrier, it will capture some Houdini flies. However, we don't see that it actually reduces parasitism in the blocks. It does catch some flies, but there is still a lot of parasitism. That's why we want to create a bait that will really attract the flies to it more than the bee hotel does, versus kind of passively catching some flies that are nearby. And that's why it's important to create a trap like the ones that we're trying out. So,
you want to explain a little bit about what we were learning from researchers in Europe?
Yeah, so like I said, the Houdini fly is native to Europe, and Houdini fly is something that people who rear mason bees there have had to deal with for a long time, much like some of our native parasites like the sapija wasp or Stelis cuckoo bees. They're something that's around but doesn't cause massive problems like what we see. They don't get, sites with 50, 60, 80% parasitism in their blocks. And there is a study out of Germany that shows that the longer a bee is out of their bee hotel, the higher the risk is for parasitism by flies. That makes sense, right? Because, when the bee leaves, that's when the flies sneak in. So the more time that the mama bee spends away, the higher the likelihood is for parasitism. And so a way that bees can combat this is with something called nest guarding. Now, this is when a bee physically keeps their body in the nest and blocks the entrance, and this prevents parasites from going in. There is, of course, a trade-off, right? If you're spending time guarding your nest, you're not out building, collecting pollen and laying more eggs. And so in the US, we see that our osmia do nest guard against our native parasites like the sapija wasp and Stelis cuckoo bees. And so far, from what I've observed, we don't believe them to be nest guarding against Houdini fly, so it doesn't seem like they have this natural behavioral protection that potentially mason bees in Europe have.
Yeah, it's interesting as we are now partnering with the European researchers as well. This information is out for everybody because, in Europe we're getting a lot of people calling us from Europe as well and following along, which is why we wanted to do more videos today to teach you about Houdini flies. So we're going to continue sharing our research with you and Abigail's research as we proceed, and all the studies that she is doing in the cages. We're going to share that data and research with you because it's going to be a joint collaborative effort to figure out a way of stopping the Houdini fly. And we have so many hosts that have their mason bees and love them so much. And I think that's something we should wrap up on is we're visiting right now. We're in Oregon, and we've pulled up a bunch of people that have reported Houdini fly. So we're driving to homes. We're collecting Houdini fly with this cool little bug sucker thing. We're collecting them so that Abigail can release them in the cages. But what we're noticing is a lot of the bee houses that we're visiting have never been cleaned, are really old, and that's where the Houdini fly are. So let's talk a little bit about what people can do moving forward to prevent Houdini fly in the future.
Yes. So like Tira said, that the cases where we see a lot of Houdini fly, typically it is old nests that have been out for many years that bees have been nesting in over and over again. And that's where you kind of see almost this cloud of flies around the bee hotel. And so to prevent this, it's really important to clean your nesting material every fall. Tira has a ton of great information and videos available to watch about how you clean your nesting material, the proper nesting material to put out to be easy to clean and maintain every year, because unfortunately it's not a set it and forget it, which is really a bummer because there are typically no instructions that come with a bee hotel, but that is what we are here for, to answer your questions and help guide you about cleaning them out. That way you get rid of your Houdini fly each year and you don't accidentally become a parasite and pathogen hotel. You actually support bees instead of supporting an invasive parasite. Who wants that?
No. Yeah, and that's something that I've observed as well, is that I've done a bunch of videos on YouTube. Our YouTube channel, just go to Rent Mason Bees, and there's a lot of videos that I put on there, out with the old, in with the new, where people are transitioning away from these old nesting material. They had Houdini fly. They contacted us. I went to their house. We opened up their nesting material, found Houdini, found some of the blocks had nothing viable in it, because you guys, it looks healthy. If you have mud plugs and it looks, oh, my bees are doing just fine, you can't leave them out year round, because inside, behind that mud plug, there could be a whole predator habitat. There's pollen mites, Houdini fly, chalk brood. There's so many things. And yes, Abigail, I have a ton of videos. Abigail's right. Just visit my YouTube channel to learn more about the predators. But it's so important. The 3 key steps when you're hosting mason bees is you are, in spring, putting clean nesting material out. The end of spring, you're removing that nesting material. Mason bees do not stay out year round. They only live 6 to 8 weeks, and you need to remove them from the summer elements because there's the monowasp and other predators that can get to them. And then the third step, and the key step, is opening everything up and cleaning in the fall. And the only way you can do that is if you're using proper nesting material. So bamboo or logs with holes drilled in it, you cannot use. They're so dangerous for bees because you never can open and clean them. And so again, we have a lot of videos. I'll put links down below in the video content where you can go access these. But there are ways that you can transition away from this old nesting material to new nesting material. And then, yeah, when you open up your nesting material in the fall, you can see the Houdini fly larvae. They are these little tiny white maggot looking things. There's like this curly brown frass. I'll share some pictures, and you can spot the Houdini, and you can 100% eliminate them. You will remove all of them. Now, out in your natural habitat, no, you're not going to remove anything that nested in your habitat, but you will remove everything that nested in your nesting block, so that you're giving your bees a better shot from year to year.
Now, one thing I want to say that is a question that Tira and I have received is, well, aren't these, parasites or predators natural? I'm just letting what happens in nature happen. Now, bee hotels are not natural, right? You're already disturbing nature by putting a bee hotel out. Now, if you want to support pollinators, that means that you have to clean your bee hotel, because you're giving otherwise parasites and predators an all-you-can-eat buffet, essentially, which would not be found in nature, right? They're nesting in hollowed-out twigs and stems that are dispersed around and much harder for a predator to find compared to this big, conspicuous bee hotel. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have a bee hotel. I think they're fabulous. I have one. You just need to properly care for it, and you can support pollinators that way.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, we have a lot of research. If you ever have any questions, you can email us at info@rentmasonbees.com. And please visit our YouTube channel. We collaborate together all the time. I've got a lot of videos with Abigail at UC Davis, live in the lab with Abigail. I teach you how to store she teaches you how to store in proper humidity and control. So a lot of great resources for everyone out there. And we're going to continue sharing our research on Houdini Fly. I know there's a lot of people following along and are interested. So yeah, we really appreciate you watching this whole video. And anything you want to say?
No, thank you so much. And like Tara said, please reach out with questions. We are here to answer them, and we love talking about bees.
Yes. All right, everyone. Happy pollinating. Bye.